He didn't wake to a violent shockwave, but to silence. A silence as heavy as the ash that settles after a cataclysmic explosion. There were no sirens blaring, no artificial systems humming, just the faint, ragged sound of breathing, like rusted claws raking across his throat. His eyelids felt sealed together by iron dust. When he forced them open, his vision was immediately scorched by the blood-red hue of the planetary sky. Not from a sun, but from a roaring, ionized layer spinning above like an open wound in the atmosphere. Pain speared through the back of his head, as though someone had driven a steel stake into his neck. His neck seized, but his right hand still moved, still clenched around the flight stick, or what was left of it. A twisted piece of scorched metal, still radiating heat, like it had embedded itself in the memory of what he had just survived. Something no one should have survived. Ash fell like rain. Melted metal streaked across the black sand in sticky red-brown trails. The acrid stench of burning wires mixed with the chemical decay of high-grade polymers, a smell so caustic it would never leave him, because it was the last thing his nose registered before losing consciousness during the crash. But that wasn't what pulled him back. It was the shadow. A pair of legs, clad in sleek black armor, stood motionless amid the wreckage, an unmoved monument untouched by heat, ash, or ruin. Her armor wasn't like anything Riven had ever seen, its plates flexed like living tissue, matte and seamless, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. She said nothing, just tilted her head, assessing him as if deciding whether he was a corpse, a creature, or a complication. He coughed, then choked. Blood edged his lips, but he still managed a crooked smile, because the human instinct to mock death never quite dies. "Good morning, if it is morning. You're the first thing I've seen since the blast. Should I be grateful or terrified?" Her voice was deep, smooth, like fractured quartz, sharp even in its stillness. "Your name?" "Riven. Riven Hale. Terrible name, but breathing, acceptable." She asked no further questions, showed no concern. She stepped forward, leaned down, and with a strength that froze his spine, she wrenched the metal shard off his leg. Pain screamed from knee to throat, but he didn't cry out. She observed, not with pity, not with cruelty, just classification. She lifted him in one motion, no strain, no hesitation. He collapsed briefly against her shoulder, realizing the armor felt cold like subsoil ice, but smooth like freshly shed snakeskin, unlike any material made by human hands. He wanted to ask, but his lips didn't move fast enough. They said nothing to each other for the next 40 minutes as she led him across the rocky sands. Riven stumbled behind, in pain but unwilling to show weakness. Each step sent a jagged pulse through his right leg, but he pushed on. Her silence didn't unsettle him, it intrigued him. Their destination rose like a massive droplet embedded in stone, smooth, dark, glowing faintly from within, as if it breathed with the planet's core. Electromagnetic storm winds brushed its surface without leaving a single scratch. The entryway opened with a pressurized hiss, and once it sealed behind them, Riven felt the outside world snap off. She had led him into another reality, one where Earth's laws no longer applied. She entered first, removing her helmet. The interior lights reflected off her bluish-gray skin, not pale like illness, but luminous like living crystal. Smooth, flawless, refracting light into hues he couldn't name. But her eyes were impossible to forget. Liquid mercury, never still, as if processing not just what they saw, but every micro-shift in his breath, his pulse, the fracture lines behind his gaze. "I am Elyza Tyron. Not a nurse, not a rescue unit, not your mother." Riven let out a short laugh, then slumped onto the cold steel floor. "I didn't mistake you for any of those." "Good. Sit down. Don't dirty the floor." The air inside the station was saturated with ozone, so sterile it made every wound feel painfully precise. No bacteria, no history, just now and her. "Do you have a comm device?" "I do." He slowly retrieved a data disk from his chest pocket. "But if you're planning to extract intel, the least you could do is offer me a drink first." She didn't laugh, but her mouth twitched slightly, not at the joke, at the surprise. After checking his device, she confirmed, civilian pilot, unarmed, peace envoy, then tossed him a clean outfit. Thin, skin-hugging. He changed right there. She didn't look away. Her eyes passed over his torso, pausing for a beat on an old scar, but she said nothing. The atmosphere thickened. Do you always detain strangers at your personal outposts like this? Only the ones that confuse me. I confuse you? Your body has a biocompatibility rating of 88%, nearly identical to my species. That can't be a coincidence. He squinted. Are you saying I match you? I'm saying my body shouldn't be reacting like this to yours. Her voice dropped. The ceiling lights dimmed with environmental sensitivity. The air between them tingled with static. Riven stepped forward, just enough to see the war in her eyes. She led him into the bioscan chamber. Light slid down his body like liquid plasma. She placed her hand on his chest to stabilize the readout. His heart rate spiked. She felt it, but her hand didn't move. Stop, he murmured, his voice deep and roughened. You say stop, but you don't step back. Because I'm not sure I want you to. They stood so close they could hear each other swallow. Her scent wasn't, it was pheromone, a natural signature, warm metal laced with strange fruit. Her skin glowed faintly, turning every edge of her silhouette into a dreamlike blur. I shouldn't feel this way about an outsider, she exhaled. I'm not an outsider, unless you want me to be. And she kissed him, abrupt, without warning, no caution. Like a rupture in her willpower had been breached, and everything long restrained erupted like molten desire cracking through the crust of duty. The Solvex station shifted into energy freeze mode as a solar storm surged. Ventilation and cooling systems shut down. The heat escalated, drenching them both in sweat. But neither pulled away. No one asked, should we? Only, can we still turn back? Clothing fell away, not from lust but from necessity. From heat, from the shared understanding that hiding was now irrelevant. When skin met skin, it wasn't contact, it was liberation. I can't stop trembling, Elyza whispered, her breath ghosting over his collarbone. Do you want me to stop? Never. Beneath the burning breath of a forbidden world, defying every law their societies ever etched into bone or code, they chose, freely, irrevocably, to be each other's answer. The first sliver of light crept through the narrow slit of Solvex Station's sealed door, like a thread piercing the cold veil of the darkness that had just receded. It brought no warmth, no promise, only the blunt exposure of all that had unfolded throughout the night. On the narrow bed in the bioelectric chamber, two bodies lay pressed together, their skin still damp, their breathing not yet fully synchronized. Elyza wasn't asleep. Her eyes were open, fixed on every line of Riven's face, so calm now it felt absurd. He slept soundly, as if nothing had happened, as if the moment they shed every layer of armor, both physical and emotional, hadn't been the most forbidden act she'd ever committed. Her heart didn't beat fast, but it beat deep. And in that stillness, the fragile boundary between duty and desire began to collapse. Why am I like this because of you? She whispered, not expecting an answer, not needing one. Her fingertips brushed against his temple, and she placed a kiss light as stardust, not out of lust, not from obligation, but from fear that if she didn't, this moment would vanish, like a warm dream in the belly of a cold planet. What she didn't know was that outside, everything had already begun to fall apart. Rhea 6's automated satellite system had just received a sequence of irregular biosignals, blurred images of two unknown entities in intimate contact, extracted from the station's biosensory interface. A central AI didn't need human approval to understand what had occurred. It transmitted the alert. It initiated the protocols. And within seconds, Elyza Tyron's name lit up in crimson across every planetary control interface. Emergency Level 2, Elyza Tyron exhibiting signs of regulatory breach. Revoke all access. Track and extract. A faint beep from the control console startled Elyza. The glow from the interface reflected in her eyes like a blade, and for a few seconds she stood still, watching the cascade of command overrides. Her credentials were revoked. Access denied. Her once supreme password, now invalid. She knew this wasn't a system error. This was judgment, handed down without trial. They know. Her voice dropped like a stone into a crater, awakening a storm inside her. Not out of fear, but from the truth. Even a single night of living authentically was enough to make an empire see her as a threat. Riven stepped out of the sterilization chamber, still fastening his belt. His eyes were lazy with post-night daze, but the sharpness in his tone cut through as soon as he saw her expression. "What's going on?" "We've been found. We're being hunted." "We." He emphasized the word, not out of disbelief, but as a test. Elyza didn't turn, didn't blink. "You think I have a choice after what's happened?" Another sound punctured their conversation, lower, heavier, the engines of a fast response assault craft approaching from the southwest. Elyza turned to him. No longer Elyza the commander, the untouchable. Now just a woman who realized even silence was no longer an option. "Come with me, or die here alone." No more words were needed. They bolted into the emergency descent tunnel. The entire Solvex station shook as containment charges activated around them. Elyza led the way, unarmed, relying only on obsolete biometric codes to confuse the sensors. Riven followed close behind, memorizing every turn, every crack in the corridor, knowing that if they survived, this knowledge might be needed again. The passage led them to the transit junction, once used to move troops during wartime, now a deadly maze. And that's where they ran into a Nyrel soldier. No time to warn, no time to negotiate. Elyza struck like lightning. Disarmed, crushed the throat, 2 moves. No blade, no gun, just hands in training honed for death in the worst possible conditions. Riven froze, his pulse pounded harder than when he'd been running. "That was one of yours." She glanced back, eyes unflinching. "Not anymore." They hid in the geotechnical layer, an abandoned war zone from the plasma conflicts. No lights. Only the soft red glow of a dying reactor. Elyza activated a personal disruption emitter, creating a static field that disabled tracking systems within several hundred meters. She slumped to the floor, panting like someone who'd just escaped the mouth of fire. Her armor torn in places. Sweat trailing from her neck down to her chest, her exposed skin glowing with an eerie amber under the emergency light, like molten resin pulsing beneath cracked obsidian. Riven sat opposite her. Gone was the usual playfulness in his eyes, only silence now. And the question growing behind it. Did she regret it? "You didn't have to do this for me. You think this is about you? Then what's it for?" "Because I've never wanted anyone to touch me the way you did. And I don't want that to be the last time." The air between them thickened. 1 beat, 2. Then Riven stepped forward, no request, no hesitation. He placed a hand on her cheek, so simple a gesture, and yet Elyza closed her eyes. She didn't pull away, didn't look down. For the first time she let someone without a badge, without rank, without bloodline, touch the most guarded part of her, her solitude. Above, the planetary broadcast system blared across all zones. The artificial voice reverberated through every control point. "Elyza Tyron, classified breach of highest protocol. Any unit that cites the subject is ordered to detain immediately. No leniency." A tactical overlay flickered on screen. Red zones closing in on their coordinates. The strike team had entered the geo-layer, equipped with sensor drones, null gas grenades, and a shoot-on-sight mandate. Elyza stared at the map, then retrieved a folded scrap of paper, an ancient chart she'd kept after the emergency routes were sealed. She pointed to one location, a long-abandoned signal tower on level 6. "If we reach it, we can send a transmission out. Maybe we don't have to die here." Riven looked at her. "And what about you?" "If you survive, then I still have hope." He took her hand. It was cold, cut, but she didn't pull back. "I'm not leaving unless you're with me." And so they rose. No more debate. No need for words. only a shared glance, an unspoken pact. If they had to die, they would die for something worth living. Elyza and Riven stepped into the pitch-black tunnel, deep as the planet's throat. Their footsteps echoed, not as fugitives fleeing, but as soldiers marching into defiance. Every step a heartbeat. Every heartbeat a statement. This was no longer about species or systems. This was about two souls, choosing each other. The cold inside the corridor of level 6 was not like the chill of winter, nor like the metallic cold that pervaded the underground cities. It was the cold of memories left buried too long, of wars never given graves, of dried blood on stone walls and shattered bones beneath layers of digital dust. Elyza walked ahead, her steps growing heavier with each descent into the depths. She held a nearly obsolete energy rifle in her hands, while Riven followed in silence, gripping a pulse emitter, not as a weapon, but as the last tether holding him to the mission. Their footsteps echoed through rusting struts and arched ceilings that once served as a relay station for a century now gone. Severed power conduits dangled like veins torn from the body. The air was thick, windless, but felt suffocating, as if every sound was strangled by the ghosts of the last battle. Elyza moved quickly, eyes forward and unblinking, yet Riven noticed her shoulders tighten as they reached the first junction. "You've been here before?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "Once," she said after a brief pause. "When I was still a cadet, I swore I'd never come back." "Then why now?" His tone remained calm, not pushing, not probing, just placing a question where she might reveal a part of herself she'd never shown. "Because I'm no longer a cadet," she said softly, then turned away quickly. "And because you are worth breaking that oath." Riven said nothing more. He didn't need to. He had heard something more valuable than an answer. Her voice had cracked. For the first time, the armor Elyza Tyrant had built around herself had begun to fracture. The final security door loomed before them like a scar carved into the rock. Tall, heavy, silent. The control panel beside it still flickered faintly. Elyza pressed her palm to it. One beat, two, no response. She tried again and again. Access denied. She exhaled hard, resting her forehead against the old steel. Her gaze dropped, and in her mercury-colored eyes was something unspoken. Regret, admission, helplessness. "We're too late." "Then let me try." Riven stepped up quietly, so softly he made no sound. He pulled out an old data disk, inserting it into a side port. Lines of code flared to life, unstable, erratic, but alive. Alive like a beast jolted from a century of slumber. Elyza spun around as the access screen displayed a chain of permissions, not hers. "Where did you get that?" "I'm not just a pilot," he said, tilting his head with an unsettling calm. "I'm a spy. I was ordered to study Varia 6's defense systems." Her eyes shifted, not with anger or fear, but with the sharp clarity of a blade freshly honed. But before she could speak, he raised a hand to stop her. "But I swear, no one ordered me to sleep with you. And if they had, I'd still do it. But the second time would be for me." She looked at him. One beat. Then her lips curved, not in mockery, not with cold detachment, but for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, she genuinely smiled. The door creaked open, slow and heavy, as if the structure itself were awakening to its memories. They stepped into what had once been the communication heart of the entire Western Hemisphere, now reduced to collapsed antenna arrays, control panels buried under dust, but the power core still pulsed faintly. Riven watched, stunned, as Elyza approached the central chair like she'd never left it. She sat down, her fingers dancing over the hologram keyboard like a symphony of memories returning. Access code, Tyrant E912. Channel open, initiating planetary broadcast protocol. Encrypt signal. Transmit message. Elyza Tyrant no longer belong to your system. I choose freedom, and I choose him. A soft beep confirmed the signal. A pale blue pulse radiated from the core transmitter. In that instant, Riven felt as if the whole planet had just been forced to hear a woman's confession, someone who had once been the symbol of perfect obedience. "What now?" he asked. "Now we—" Boom! A thunderous blast ripped through the chamber. The dome was torn open by precision energy rounds. Blinding light and shrapnel rained down. They hit the floor hard. Smoke surged in like a tidal wave. The strike team had arrived. No warning, no negotiations. Elyza dragged Riven to his feet. She shot the first two soldiers with no hesitation, her eyes as cold as ice dissolving into the blood steaming on the floor. She shoved him toward the emergency exit. "Run." "No. Please." Her voice cracked. Elyza's voice, for the first time, held something he had never heard before: desperation. "I won't forgive myself if you die." But Riven didn't run. He grabbed her hand and yanked her back, shouting, "Then don't let me die. Don't become the thing you swore to destroy." She looked at him, between fire and smoke, between cutting ties and holding on, and then clenched her teeth, pulled out the auxiliary command key, and screamed, "Release the magnetic shield! Detonate the core transmitter!" A blast erupted from within. Level 6 lit up. A surge of violet-blue light consumed the chamber. The protective field ruptured. The emitted MP wave short-circuited the entire strike team. They collapsed one by one. Riven barely managed to pull Elyza into the emergency tunnel before the energy wave rebounded. When the noise faded, when the only sound left was the pounding of blood inside their chests, they stood on the surface, on the outskirts of the ruined city. The sky opened up, and ion rain began to fall. Long silver streaks sliced through the air, not burning but leaving faint glowing trails across the skin. Elyza stood silently in the rain, letting each drop wash away blood, smoke, and every burden she had carried. Her hair soaked, eyes closed. No one told her to cry, but no one could deny her the right to simply stand there, as a human. Riven approached, removed his jacket, and draped it over her shoulders. "You still have me." "No," she turned, eyes red but dry. "Now I finally have you, for the first time." And they embraced, not for survival, not for desire, but because, for the first time, two people who had once stood on opposite battle lines had crossed the threshold between obedience and freedom, to find the one thing that needed no justification: love. The old spacecraft bore no colors, no emblems of any nation, species, or alliance. It was layered in space dust thick as stone, seemingly forgotten in the frozen heart of a desolate world for centuries. Yet deep within its hull, the biocore still lived, waiting only for the right signal, the right command strong enough to wake it from dormancy. Elyza placed her hand on the recessed control pad, a scar-like hollow etched into the ship's surface. Her palm met the biological lock, a relic reserved only for high command elite, those who once held absolute authority. A blue light pulsed from her wrist to the system's heart, triggering a low, rumbling tone, like the first breath of a beast roused from hibernation. And the ship, long buried in the planet's underbelly, began to stir. Riven stood by the half-open hatch as the wind howled through the edge of the upper atmosphere. It hissed like tearing cloth, yet he did not flinch. He simply watched her, the woman who, mere days ago, had been the embodiment of the very system he was trained to dismantle. Now she was the proof of a choice he could no longer explain by duty alone. "Where are we going?" he asked, not to learn the destination, but to hear her say "we." "Out of the tracking net, off this planet, away from everything that ever made me live like a weapon," she answered, eyes fixed on the console as line after line of old code reawakened. He nodded without pressing further. They had sacrificed too much to claim just one thing: the right to love someone without paying for it in blood or reputation. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, not to claim, not to demand, but just to remind her he was there. And for the first time, Elyza didn't push it away. She placed her hand over his, holding on like it was the last sliver of her own humanity. The ship lifted from the surface, piercing through the howling electric storm beyond. The sky of Varia 6 did not forgive departures. Plasma winds slashed through ion layers, light flaring like 1,000 needles against the hull. But they didn't look back. No pursuit, no sirens, just silence. Not because they'd been forgiven, but because punishment hadn't caught up yet. But Elyza knew. Time was all they had stolen, not pardon. Hours after they left orbit, planetary news networks went live with emergency bulletins. Elyza Tyran, once the most decorated commander of the Nyrel Coalition, was now labeled traitor, genetic disgrace, symbol of moral collapse. Red banners scrolled endlessly. Species betrayal, biological contact with outsiders, potential mutagenic risk. In the thousands of condemnations, no one asked if she had loved. They only asked how far she had fallen. And for Riven, that only confirmed one truth. What they shared was real enough, strong enough, dangerous enough to shake an entire system. They reached the outer rim of the cold star system Ezen core, a place without patrols, without oversight, without questions. At a border outpost called Carta's Rest, a maze of rusted steel, chemical haze, and old ozone, they rented a living pod. Small, cramped, lacking amenities, but private and camera-free. A place where existing didn't require clearance. A place where maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't need weapons just to keep breathing together. The room had no real windows, only a simulated view of a dust-covered starfield. Elyza sat on the bed, eyes blank as ice, asking softly, "Can we live here?" "We don't have to live here," Riven replied, gently pulling her shoulder to lean against his chest. "We just have to live together." She didn't answer, but she didn't pull away. Her breath slowed. His heartbeat beneath her cheek hummed gently, rhythmically, a feeling she once considered illogical, useless, a distraction from mission parameters. Now, it was the only thing that reminded her she could still love and be loved. The first nights in Carta's Rest were quiet. No liquor, no music, no laughter. Only the hiss of thermal stoves, the chemical scent of rehydrated protein meals, and the wind clawing through steel walls. But each night, when the lights dimmed, Elyza lay next to him. Not from fear, not from need, but for a nameless comfort that came every time her fingers brushed his in the dark, as if letting go would pull her back into the place she fought to escape. Riven had a habit. Each night, just before sleep, he would whisper something in her ear, simple phrases, anchors to tether reality. "If you're still here with me tonight, then everything's okay." At first, Elyza only smirked, dismissing it as a sentimental trick. But after a few nights, she whispered back, softly, almost imperceptibly, but enough for him to hear, "And tomorrow, I'll still be here." One morning, when Elyza opened her eyes, the soft glow of artificial daylight lit the room's corner. Riven sat at the desk, back turned, writing on something. Real paper, cellulose-based, the kind traded with old-world currency or off-world supply runs. "What are you writing?" she asked, her voice groggy but no longer hollow. "A new name, for us." "Do we need a new name?" "Not really, but if the past can hunt us, then at least this present deserves its own name." He turned around and held up the sheet. The handwriting was rough, slightly slanted, but honest. The ones who belonged to no one, but always to each other. She didn't laugh, didn't need to. She stepped forward, pressed a light kiss to his forehead, a silent thank you, and sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "If this is a love story," she said, "then we haven't finished writing it yet, Riven Hale. And you're still Elyza Tyran. Mine." "No." She squeezed his hand. "I'm Elyza. Of myself. But if someone is to walk beside me, it can only be you." It's not a grand ending. No fireworks. No legendary triumph. Just something simpler, yet greater than any conquest. Peace. Across a universe teeming with chaos, when honor, race, and duty can all be torn apart by one impossible decision, Elyza and Riven chose the only thing that needed no one's permission, to love. And to live as if that choice was the most right thing they'd ever done.